Good afternoon, Year 6, and welcome to our third lesson of outdoor learning this half term, all about adaptation. So I'm going to share our screen and then we can get started. Fantastic. So, last lesson, we looked at the Galapagos finches and how a change in their environment required them to adapt to that environment. And what happened was that those with larger beaks were able to survive to the new changes in their environment and passed on that trait to their offspring. So their offspring inherited their large beaks, and then the Galapagos finch started to evolve so that they had larger beaks. And this was an example of how animals and plants adapt to their changing environment. And this process of adaptation was called natural selection. So we're going to be discussing a little bit more about that today. Your task last week was to choose one of these animals that live in a very extreme environment, usually the desert or the Arctic, and look at how they have adapted to those very extreme environments. So, what we're going to do today is take one animal that lives in one extreme environment and put it into another extreme environment. So here we have the elephant that obviously usually lives in incredibly hot places in the Arctic, okay, an incredibly cold place. So I'm going to call my new species of animal, okay, the polar font. All right, cross between, I guess, a polar bear and an elephant. And in order for my polar font to survive, it needs to adapt from where it is as an elephant to this cold environment. So I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes to have a think. How is this elephant going to survive in this environment? What do we need to think about first? What are the things that you're thinking, oh, that elephant's not going to survive because... So I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes just to think about what does this elephant need in order to survive in the Arctic? Well done, Year 6. Okay, so these are the things that came to my mind immediately when I thought, oh gosh, I've just put an elephant in the Arctic. Okay, first of all, the temperature. All right, that elephant is going to be very cold. So I need to think, how can my elephant adapt to the cold? The second thing I thought is that it's really not camouflaged, and that there are other big predators in the Arctic, such as polar bears, who are obviously better adapted to that environment, and therefore my elephant might be at risk. So I was thinking about predators. Food. Okay, so an elephant usually eats plants and leaves and pieces of bark. All right, there are not very many trees in the Arctic, particularly in the winter. In the summer, there will be some greenery, but is it enough to feed a really big animal like an elephant? All right, so animals like polar bears, they are carnivores, so they eat meat, and that's how they put on a lot of weight before they go and hibernate. So that was the other thing. Do I want this, my polifont, to hibernate over the winter, or is it going to adapt in a different way to enable it to survive a very harsh Arctic winter? And then I was thinking, is its trunk useful? What could it use its trunk for? Because obviously that's one of an elephant's defining features. So I wanted to try and think about what could I use its trunk for. So I'm just going to give you 30 seconds to have a think. What can we do to adapt my elephant to the cold? What can we do to ensure that it's camouflaged? Does it need to be camouflaged? Is it going to be a prey to some large animals, or are we going to give it some defensive features, which means that a polar bear wouldn't attack it? What about food? What is it going to eat? How will it need to adapt in order to eat that food? Is it going to hibernate? If it is going to hibernate, how will it do so? And what can it use its trunk for? So I'm going to give you 30 seconds to have a think about those questions. Excellent, Year 6. So these are just some of the things that I was thinking of. So when I thought about food, I thought about the elephant's teeth. Okay, so the elephant's teeth are for grinding vegetation. All right, so they're very, very flat. Okay, so that's the picture in the far left-hand corner. If you look at the picture in the middle, that's the polar bear's teeth. All right, so they've got canines in order to eat meat. So if I wanted my polifont to become a carnivore, I need to think very carefully about things like its teeth and how it will catch its meals. So polar bears, for example, have incredibly sharp claws, whilst my elephant does not. So if I wanted this animal to adapt to become a carnivore, I need to think about things like how will it catch its food, and also how will it eat it. So maybe its teeth, maybe its trunk, maybe its feet need to adapt. So those are just some things that I was thinking of. However, it could remain a herbivore. So, for example, we know that the woolly mammoth, similar to an elephant, was a herbivore and lived during the Ice Age. So during the summers in the Arctic, there are some parts where the ice melts and reveals vegetation. So maybe my polifont is going to try and eat lots in those few summer months and then hibernate. I don't know. Just some ideas. And then obviously keeping itself warm. It might, some animals grow an extra layer of fat or blubber, okay, to keep themselves warm. Some animals, like the polar bear, have thick coats of fur. So you maybe want to think about how your polar font will adapt to the cold. Also, an elephant has a long trunk and quite a long tail and long tusks. And you might want to think, actually, if it's very, very cold, do I want parts of the elephant's body to be sticking out really, really far where they can get very cold? All right, you might want to think about how you can change the elephant that way. And then the final thing I was thinking about is hibernation. Okay, so polar bears dig themselves caves where they can go and hibernate for the winter. Is my polar font going to hibernate? And if it is, how is it going to find or dig itself a cave so that it can shelter over the winter? So just some things that I was thinking about when I was thinking of how my elephant has to adapt to become a polar font. And just in a little bit more detail, this is just a couple of the adaptations I thought that my polar font could have. So I've given it thick blubbery skin to protect it from the cold. I've made it white in colour, so I've adapted it so that it's white in colour to help camouflage itself against when it's in snow and ice. All right, if I want my polar font to be camouflaged, do I want it to be camouflaged because it needs to hide from predators like a polar bear? Or do I want it to be camouflaged because it is a predator and it's actually become a carnivore? So I would think about why I've camouflaged my polar font in relation to whether it's a predator or whether it could be someone else's prey. On its feet, I've given it insulated pads so that it can walk on the snow. And also, like I was mentioning before, I've adapted it so it no longer has a tail, so that it has a shorter trunk and shorter tusks, so that it doesn't have these extremities that can get really, really cold. There will be lots of other adaptations that I haven't put here, but those were just some of the key ones that I thought I would share with you now. So your activity today, Year 6, is to choose an animal that currently lives in an extreme environment and put it into another extreme environment. So you looked at some animals last week that had been adapted to their extreme environment. So, for example, we were looking at the thorny devil, which is in the Australian desert. Okay, maybe you would like to put that in the Arctic in a very, very cold environment. How could we, how can the thorny devil adapt to be in the Arctic? Or you might decide to do the opposite of what I just did with the elephant and put a polar bear into a very hot climate. So put it into the desert or put it into a jungle. Okay. So you can give your new animal a different name. Okay. Like I have done with my polar font. All right, so it's an elephant that lives in a polar region. And I would like you to label this animal to show how it will adapt to survive in its new environment. And I would like you to think about all the things that we have discussed today. So I'd like you to think about camouflage. I'd like you to think about predators and food, shelter, warmth. How will that animal adapt to survive in that environment? Okay, you can draw or paint or make a model of your new animal creation. My polar font looked quite similar to an elephant, but yours might adapt even further. So actually your new animal might look quite different to the animal that you started with. Okay, so it depends how much you feel like your animal needs to adapt. But I would really, really like you to think about all those things that an animal needs to survive in its habitat, and really think about how your animal can adapt to survive in this new extreme environment. Great. Well done, Year 6. I am looking forward to seeing your work on Seesaw, and I will see you next week. Bye.